Tēnā koutou katoa. He mihi aroha kia koutou e mātakitaki ana tēnei hōtaka. Ko rewa e te kahu tēnei. E mihi tēnei kia koutou e noho nei I raro I te wā o Matariki. Tuatai, ka tuku atu taku mihi ki te atua. Mo ana manakitanga ki rungi a tātou ko tai mai ki tēnei wā. Greetings. My name is Lewai Te Kahu. Welcome to all those that are watching this little program and participating in this workshop. Firstly, I acknowledge our Lord and Saviour. I acknowledge God for the great things that He's doing and why He's brought us here today. Tuarua. Ka tuku atu taku mihi kia rātou ko hinga te pō. Ngā mate o te tau ko pahure o ngā marama o ngā wiki. Haere atu rā, haere, haere, haere. Secondly, I acknowledge those who have all passed away. As you'll find out in this program or this workshop today, remembering those who have passed on is an important part and fixture of Matariki. One of the stars in the constellation of Matariki is called Puhutakawa. And this star sign reminds us to remember those who are no longer with us. So my farewell mihi speech to them was to acknowledge who they are and the things that they've contributed to our lives. So to all those who are no longer with us, that have passed away in this last year, the memories, the laughter, the joy, the sadness that it all brings when we farewell someone, we remember them at this particular time. A kia koutou te whānau, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora whānau, my name's Rewai Te Kahu. I've had the privilege of putting this little resource together, and it's a workshop resource that just looks at Matariki and poses some questions for us to consider. I have a slide that I'm using, and I'll be talking to that as we progress through. So what I'll do now is I'll just share that slide with us, and then we'll start into our session together. Mānawatia a Matariki. Celebrate Matariki. Psalm 91, Psalm 19, 1-2 says this. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. The word firmament literally means from our perspective on earth. How humans view the universe from this place we call earth. Or for us today, when we're looking at Matariki, how we in Aotearoa, New Zealand, view the world from our perspective here in Aotearoa. You see, all of space was created for our pleasure and our purpose. It is important that we hear and understand the voice of the Lord in these last days. So Matariki can be a time for us to hear, understand what God has been saying to us, what God is saying to us, and what God will be saying to us in relationship to the view that we have of the firmament. In this workshop, in this session, I have broken up our time into 4 po concerning Matariki. As you can see on the slide there, the first section is we're just going to look at the holiday. This will be just a quick look at how we've ended up with another holiday in our Gregorian calendar. Secondly, we will look at what is Matariki. And here we'll explore what Matariki is about. And what does it say to us about our fulfillment around us? We have a po that looks at the Bible and star signs. Have we lost connection to our environment and therefore to God? Could God be speaking to us through our firmament, like he did to many in the Bible of the past? Could he be speaking to us through our firmament lens of Matariki? And then lastly, we're going to be a call to action. What can we do over Matariki? Here is the call to action, and I'll offer some practical ideas of things that we could get involved with to celebrate Matariki. It might be even a time to rethink about how our view and how we view mission and the mission of God for us here in Aotearoa, to know God and to make him known. Throughout this presentation, I have a series of questions, about 5 slides where they raise some questions for discussion. It's not my intent that I should just talk all the time, although I am recording this and are talking all the time. But what I want to do is that when these questions pop up, so for example, like this one, it's a time for you just to pause the slide or pause this particular presentation and get around to groups and have a talk to someone. And yeah, it's just an opportunity for you to participate in this particular time together. Now, I don't have an exhaustive amount of questions. These are really just to wet our feet, as it were. What I would really encourage your community or your church group to consider is to think about some local questions that are pertinent to you in your context that you come in. So you might find that these are the questions that I've raised are just springboards, but it gives you an opportunity to consider other questions that you may have. And so when we have the slide come up like this, just pause the video recording and then move into your group discussions and then come back together. Yeah, so just pause it here. And here's my first question. You might have other questions that you want to raise, but what do you know about Matariki? Kia ora, welcome back. I hope you had a good discussion around what is Matariki, and I'm sure a number of you know and have experienced Matariki in the past, but it is a growing fixture. This po here is looking at how did we come to Matariki holiday, and I'm just going to do a really quick sketch of this, and in particular the resources that are out there. So I've drawn on a news clippings, public releases from the government. I've also drawn on information from Living by the Stars. It's a web page that you can go to look at more detail around that. Te Wānanga Aotearoa, they've got some really good resources as part of the institution around developing tools for schools, for kohanga reo, for organisations that they can participate in. And there's a real push now in organisations to consider their bicultural journey or their treaty journey, and in particular, how they might give effect to that in the organisations. And Matariki is one of those features. The government has committed to making Matariki a public holiday, and that distinctly recognise and celebrates Te Ao Māori. And this will commence on the 24th of June in 2022, which is this year. Matariki will be a distinctly New Zealand holiday. If you note, all the holidays that we have to date are imported, and so this particular one will have a distinctly New Zealand flavour. In other words, the lens or the firmament that we're looking for will reflect our place in the world, our place in the South Pacific, and our place here in Aotearoa. It's a time for reflection and to celebrate. It'll be a public holiday for us that recognises Te Ao Māori. Jacinda Ardern, in a recent media release, said this: "It is great to have a date locked in for this year." She actually said this last year, but I'm saying it for this year. This will be a day to acknowledge our nation's unique shared identity and the importance of tikanga Māori. A public holiday reflects the values that New Zealanders share and want to see represented in our calendar. Recognising the significance of Matariki through public holiday will give Māori across our country a chance to share their traditions, histories and stories with the rest of New Zealand. Te Ao Māori plays a large part in defining who we are as New Zealanders. And who we are as a nation and our setting here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. New Zealand is part of the rest of the world, and Matariki as a public holiday will reflect our view of that world. And we will celebrate together the uniqueness of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and further strengthen the shared ties and sense of identity together. The primary purpose of Matariki is to establish a public holiday to celebrate Māori culture. This is an appropriate recognition of Māori as treaty partners up and down this country. As a result, a group called the Matariki Advisory Group was formed with their purpose to establish and set a date for Matariki to be as a public holiday, but also to acknowledge our connections and our relationships with those of the South Pacific. We're here as part of a community, and regionally we're part of a wider community in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa. The advisory group are made up of a number of people who have expertise in either navigational seafaring activities, research around stars and the cosmos and how all that works, and you can look up their names. The public figure of that group, who is the chair, is Professor Rangi Matamua, and you can look up him either on Facebook or on Living by the Stars page that he puts out. So now we come to our next set of questions. What will you do this Matariki? So pause, answer the questions. If you've got a set of questions that your team is doing yourselves, then please spend some time answering these questions, and we'll come back very soon. Welcome back. It's great to have you back with us again. So our second po, what is Matariki? As you can see by the backdrop of the slide, there is the star sign of Matariki. Matariki heralds the start of the Māori New Year and has now become a time of celebration, not just for Māori, but for many people across Aotearoa and the South Pacific. Matariki is an abbreviation of the sentence or the collection of words called ngā mata Aoteariki, the eyes of God, and refers to the cluster of stars, which are 9 of them, also known as Pleiades, that rises in midwinter. Traditionally, Matariki was used as a time to identify the optimal time for fishing, seafood gathering, planting, and harvesting. If you take a photo of Matariki or search it online, quite often we get the northern hemisphere view of Matariki. But when we look at it down here, it's actually flipped upside down. Hence the picture is the way it is. Rangi Matamua once recently read out this statement around the idea of Matariki. Tirohea atu a Matariki, kua noho i ngā puke o tautori. Ko mohi o tātou ko ia te kaiuri o te tau tahi tahi kia pīpiri. Behold, Pleiades, rising from the swell of Orion's belt, for we know Matariki measures the year during the first month of Pīpiri. In other words, the star, when it rises in connection to Tautoru, which is Orion's belt, and you'll also see the star Pīpiri in the horizon. And with the sun in northeast, in the rising of the sun, you'll see those fixtures together, and collectively, when Māori see it, they will know that we're starting the new season. So we need to see Tautoru, we'll need to see Pīpiri, which is the star sign for the month of June, or Pīpiri. You'll need to see Matariki, which I'll show you soon. And then you'll also need to see the sun is northeast. The position of the sun will be the northeast if you're looking for it. So those fixtures to get together. When Māori look at it, they'll see, we're in winter, and we're coming into the Matariki time of the year, which hails the new year. Matariki is not, as you already heard, there's a word there called Pleiades. It's not just a New Zealand fixture. I'll just move this over here so you can see it. The term Matariki is used throughout the South Pacific, in both Polynesia with us, Melanesia and Micronesia. It's an important part of the year for all Indigenous peoples of the South Pacific. Cook Islands, the constellation Pleiades is also known as Matariki, or in the Tukalo, Nui, and so forth. The words like Matariki, Makariki, Matariki, and so forth. So the whole of the South Pacific will acknowledge and celebrate Matariki, and it's a season for those of the indigeneity cultures of the Indigenous peoples to reflect, to plan, and to consider their whānau connections that's going on. Now, I just want to remind us some little nuances that pop up. Now, although the Matariki Advisory Committee of or working group have come up with a particular day to celebrate the rise of Matariki, and therefore the new year, it's not necessarily the only way of introducing the new year. So Puanga, for example, is another star sign that sits in just above Tautoru, Orion's belt. And for up here in the north, Puanga is actually the star that they look to, and it hails in for them the new year. And so there are a number of stories, a number of retelling of what this means for a lot of tribal groups and peoples and hapu around New Zealand, and that's part of the reason why I'll be asking the question around the unique fixture to the context that you live in, because there might be some nuances and some things that come up in your local context that could help inform the way you might celebrate, because they may do it a little bit different. So what I'm presenting is generally an understanding around Matariki, and it's pretty much on a consensus that the things that I'm presenting are the general process around that, but you might find tribally or hapu there are local variances, like Puanga, for example, up here in the north is the star sign. And for some other areas, they actually can't see Matariki because the location they're at. So they'll have other indicators that reference their times. Now, why is this important? Because you can't have one prescribed way of looking at the Matariki story and how we might Mānawatia Matariki, how we might celebrate Matariki. But the consensus of the Matariki Advisory Group is that there is some general commonality across the different disciplines that the experts that have drawn up the date for us, and there's very similar ways of celebrating, and so in the main we're using Matariki as that star sign. Now, just a quick walk through some of the other kōrero around Matariki. As you would have heard, I've already said, Pleiades. There's a star sign in the sky called Pleiades. So let's have a quick look at this. Now, Matariki or Pleiades is known right around the world. You'll see it in the northern hemisphere and you'll see it in the southern hemisphere, and the cultures and the eras of people living are reflected Matariki in different ways. So, for example, if you go to Asia, and in particular Japan, and you look at the reference that they call Matariki is called Subaru. And if you look at the car Subaru and you look at the emblem that's on their hood, you'll see that they've actually got, or the front car, part of the car, you'll actually see the star sign Matariki. That's there. So that's the Japanese. China, for example, the blossom star is how they reference it. If we jump up into Europe, one of the processes or things that they do in regards to acknowledging or celebrating the Matariki season or Pleiades is Freya's Hens, or we see a festival called the Maypole Festival, and that's how they celebrate that up there. That's pertaining to Pleiades, the rising of Pleiades and Matariki. In the Middle East, so if you travel over that way, you'll see they will celebrate bovine or cows. They'll reference cows and bovine as a way of understanding and connecting with the star sign Pleiades and Matariki. In the Americas, so if we go to the native peoples of Central America and the Americas, and that they look at the Matariki as part of a snake, and it's the head of a snake. As part of a constellation of a snake, and so from their firmament it looks like a snake. And in Australia, so the Indigenous people of Australia, they reference it in relationship to 7 women running away. I don't know exactly what that means or what the context of that is, but that's one of the views that they look at Matariki. Most common to the Western world is what they would call the 7 sisters. And this comes from the Greek culture. And so you'll see it work through the whole Greco-Roman world, where the constellations that we have, particularly the main 12, the main 12 of them that we have there, like Taurus the Bull, which is what we're part of. In this celebration of Matariki, it's in the neck of Taurus the Bull. And you have others like Leo and Virgo and all those types of things. So that's another kōrero. But the Greek culture, the Greco-Roman culture, had set in the names around these constellations. And a constellation, from our perspective, is really something that the sun will, a collection of stars that the sun rides through. And that's why we get our 12 constellations that we have at the moment. And Matariki itself is tied to Taurus the Bull and sits at the neck of it, with Orion's belt as part of it. So there's a collection of stars in there that we see as Taurus the Bull. So the Greeks call Pleiades and the collection of stars around Pleiades as the 7 sisters, who were the daughters of Atlas and Firmament. And as I've already mentioned, Matariki is the part of Taurus the Bull. So, how do you find Matariki? Well, you have to get up early. And here is a picture of the night sky, and in particularly in the morning. Looking east, you have probably the easiest reference to find is Orion's belt. And Orion's belt are these 3 collection of stars here, with a little bit of some stars up here. Some people call this the pot or Orion's belt. Yeah, it's the warrior. And that is called Tautoru. Takurua is over on this side, and if you look to the left, you'll see a collection of stars that's this way, looking like those look like the top of a triangle. And then you just look beyond there, and over here you'll see Matariki. You can actually see Matariki all year round, except for the last month of the Māori calendar. And so for the month of May, Matariki disappears from our skyline because as the sun and the stars move around and the moon move around, they actually, over May, they're together. And so what you'll find when the month of May comes, there's a little ceremony that Māori would participate in at the going down. So they'll look to the west and they'll see this star sign and the collection of these stars disappear. And then they'll wait for Matariki to rise again in the east. And for that month period is a time of reflecting on those who have passed on. And so that when we see the star signs of Matariki, Tautoru, and Takurua rise together with Puanga at the top, as you can see there, in the northeast, then we know that we're now about to start the new year. So for 11 months of the year, this collection of stars you'll see for each month, and in summertime you can see it in summer. Yeah, but for the month of May, it disappears and hides from us. Now, there are a whole lot of stories around that. There are stories around how Matariki came into being. And so there are traditional pūrākau and kōrero that Māori have in regards to their creation narrative. And that Tāwhiri Mātia took out his eyes after being defeated, after fighting with his brother Tūmatauenga, and then he tossed his eyes up into the sky. And that's what we get. The key thing in helping us understand Matariki at this stage is here where we can find it and the significance of it. Now, one part to remember when we come to looking at Matariki is how Māori told time. And a lot of Indigenous peoples do this, is that they've got a different way of telling time or understanding the season we're in. And so for Māori, the time mechanism traditionally was the moon, but a collection of moon, stars, and solar. And so they would watch and read and understand the star signs to tell them what season they're in. So in other words, the position of the sun on the horizon would give them an indication of this is the season, and the sun in northeast period would tell you, okay, we're in the winter period. The stars we'd see in the sky, so like Puanga, Taumatakuku, and Tautoru, and Matariki, and Takurua, as we've got up here, they would say, okay, we're in midwinter when they see that in the sky. This is important because most of the world, from a Western perspective, we follow a solar time system, which is the Gregorian calendar. And in the Gregorian calendar, we set the time. We set the time and when things are to happen. We set the pace. We set the job applications and when we do this and when we do that. And so in a Gregorian calendar, it's humans that set the time for things to happen. In a solar calendar, in a lunar calendar, the lunar calendar forces you to understand where we're at in our environment. In other words, it forces you to connect to your environment and to understand what's going on around it and where you fit in the world. Now, this became acutely aware to me a number of years back when I started beekeeping, back in 2014, I brought some bees and I started the process of beekeeping and looking after hives and so forth. And in doing so, the process of looking after and raising the hive and shrinking the hive, expanding and making nukes and all this type of thing, I had to get in sync with the seasons and the times of what's going on around me. Things like the flowering, things like when things are blooming. And so the seasonal nuances through beekeeping taught me to get into sync with the environment around me and the local context of where I'm at. And more recently, we have started a Kaitiaki Marakai project, and we're following, in a loose way, but we are following the Maramataka Māori, which Matariki informs the Māori calendar and the seasonal activities. And so through planting and gardening, we look at how we go about raising kumara and different types of vegetables. So you can actually be guided by what's presented in the season and the way the stars are and so forth around to when is it good to plant, when is it not good to plant. Now this leads me on to another part that we need to consider about Matariki. And Matariki fits into a phase of the moon. As I said before, the Gregorian calendar, which is a solar timekeeping process, it's based on the sun. Māori have a lunar calendar process. So we use the moon, the stars, and the position of the sun to give us an understanding of what should be happening. Now, within the moon phase, and a lot of people, they know about this, is that the moon has phases. And there are 30 phases within the moon on a Māori calendar process. And some of those phases are good, and a lot of folk up this way, they'll for planting, they'll follow the moon phases, and for going out fishing, they'll follow the moon phases. So when it comes to Matariki, actually Matariki falls over the phases of the moon in the last quarter of the moon phase. And it starts with Tangaroa Mua. And there are 4 phases within, as you can see by this slide, there are 4 different Tangaroa phases. And then it follows after each other down to Otane, Orongonui, Omutu, and Mutu Whenua. So when we look at Matariki across from a Māori perspective, it's actually celebrated over 8 moon phases, which do kind of sink in with our 8 days, but they're more importantly, they're moon phases. So, and it's not until you see that you're in the right moon phase, that the sun is in the right place to determine the season, that the stars are up like Pipiri and Puanga. So Pipiri is the star sign. When Māori see Pipiri, they know, oh, we're in the month of June, which is the first month. And so they'll go, okay, we're in the month of June, and we need to know those other indicators. And it starts with Tangaroa Mua and finishes with Mutu Whenua. And it's over this period that we have the Matariki celebration. However, the government didn't want to give us 8 days. So the Matariki Advisory Group came up with a particular day. And in this case for this year, it's the 24th. But it may slide to the left or right of it, depending on when all those fixtures come together. So telling time like we do with our watch and we follow the sun, there's only one really indicator of that, is the sun, 365 days a year, and the time that we have in this. It's been set by somewhere else. However, a lunar, solar, and star timekeeping mechanism, you have to have all those things together. So you get up on a morning, and in fact, from Monday onwards, you might start seeing, because we're in the Tangaroa phase that's coming up, you might see Matariki arise in the northeast and seeing it sitting there as to the picture they had before. So that's where Matariki is, and that's where you'll find it in the star in the sky in the morning. Now, Māori personify things in a way where they put images or around it to tell stories. And so this next picture is a common picture that you might start seeing in places of celebration, as a picture like this. The star that's in the middle, or the face that's in the middle, represents Matariki. And all these other star signs here, all these pictures, faces, represents different stars. Tupuarangi, Tupuanuku. So those are the things that pertain to things that grow in the heavens and things that grow on the earth. So you'll have fruit, birds in the sky, and anything that grows in trees is Tupuarangi. And Tupuanuku, which is this one down here, is anything that grows in the soil, as pertaining to the whenua. Waiti and Waita. So Waiti looks at fresh water, and Waita is seawater. And noticing that Waiti is at the top and Waita is below, so it's this idea of flowing down. And same over here with Tupuarangi and Tupuanuku. It flows down. This particular one down here represents, it's a star sign, or a face represents Pohutakawa. And Pohutakawa is the one that references those who have passed on before. So in the collection of these pictures that we have, these faces that we have here, which are actually just, I'll go back one, is just this collection of star signs stars that we see in this picture here. So Māori have just put faces to the stars and showing the relationship between the stars. But it's a common one that you might see. So you'll see that, you'll possibly start seeing this on t-shirts, you'll see it around the place at schools, and promoting in Mānawatia Matariki, the celebration of Matariki. And I just wanted to put there so you're aware of what may pop up. The term, one of the terms that is quite common that you might hear around Matariki is this term here, Matariki Hunga Nui, meaning Matariki has many people. And that's the picture that I talked about before in regards to the star sign and the collection of those star signs. But it's also about Matariki gathers people together. And I just want to say, as I may have said earlier, that some of these pictures here have come from NZBMS. They've got a little resource that's been really helpful around it, which is the Baptist Missionary Society. We've got another question, a set of questions or a question to ask. So here we go. Are there Matariki events in your area that you know of? So pause the video. That's a lot. I've just done a lot. I've exploded a whole lot of information for you there. Yeah, how to find Matariki, where it is on the night sky. There are traditional stories that relate to Matariki and how it's going there. If you go on to Professor Rangi Matamoa's website, you'll see some of those traditional stories. Yeah, what's going on in your local area? Do you know of any events that are there? And if locally you've got other questions, this could be a good time for you to ask those questions and discuss those together here. So pause, and I'll see you soon. Hey, kia ora, welcome back. We're coming on to our next po, Bible and star signs. We have seen the stars before. Living by the stars is not a new thing. If we explore the Bible, we see the sun, moon, and stars have significant role in guiding God's people through time and space. Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 says this: Let the lights in the expanse of the sky separate the day and night. Let them serve as signs to mark seasons, days, and years. Notice that they were set as signs in the sky before they were lights. Further on in verse 15 to 19. We're called to lift our eyes to the heavens. Isaiah 40 verse 26 reminds us that the Lord is the creator of all things. And other passages like Job 38, 31 to 32, or 2 Kings 23 verse 5, talk about the constellations. They talk about Pleiades and Orion's belt and the Bear or Leo. And all these features give significance to the fact that God has put the stars and the moon and the constellations in the heavens. He has placed them there. Job, for example, says, can you bind the chains of Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellation in their seasons or lead the bear with their cubs? This whole process of understanding that God has put things in the skies, God has put things in the heavens, and he controls the time and the seasons. It's interesting that we've moved to an Gregorian calendar or a solar calendar where humanity has tried to determine their own time. We set the times. An interesting feature to the process of who's in control. The constellations are set by him, the names are given by him, and the stars reflect him. The heavens declare the glory of God. I've always wondered what that meant. I've always thought about what does that really mean? And what? How do I know that? What is it saying to us? Here's another verse for us to consider. Job 9, 8 and 9. He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He is the maker of the Bear or the Leo, and Orion and Pleiades and the constellations of the south. Ko ia ana ke hora nei e ngā rangi. Hei takahi I runga I ngā ngaru o te moana. Nāna nei hanga I ake tura, ka tautoru, a māhaki, me ngā ruma I te tonga. Can you think about who else was influenced by God when he showed them the heavens? He revealed himself through the stars in dreams. I recall the story in Genesis 37 where Joseph had a dream about stars and the moon and the sun bowing down. And out of his pride, he shared it with his family. And then we see the story unfold where God humbles him and brings him to humility. What about Daniel? What about the wise men? Those wise men that traveled to Jerusalem, or to Bethlehem, to see the new king. They were led by a star. Rapua te kai hanga I ngā whetū e whetū. Rātou ko Matariki. I reo ke ana hoki ai te ātārangi o te mate nei. Āta, e whakapauritia ana ia te rā hei pō. E karangatia ana I ai ngā wā o te moana. Ringitia ana ea. Ki runga ki te mata o te whenua. Ko ihoa tōna ingoa. It is the Lord who created the stars, the Pleiades, and Orion, who turns darkness into morning and day into night. He draws up water from the oceans and pours them down as rain on the land. the Lord is his name. Let's think about that. In the midst of retelling stories of our firmament, how can we honor the Lord? How can we celebrate together and what this means? We're moving into Matariki, a time and season of celebrating. We're also moving to remember our Creator. It's an opportunity for us to consider. Here's our next set of questions for us to consider now. How might the symbolism of the stars, moon, and sun encourage us in our relationship with God? I've just done a very quick sketch of passages in the Old Testament, stories, and referred to people and places and how they experienced and how God led them by suns and moons and stars and so forth. Could there be something that we could explore in our relationship with God? Anyway, here's a question. It's just to stir us to think about things. You may have some local questions that you want to raise instead of this one. It's really up to you. So just pause it now and have an opportunity for you to discuss your questions. And then we'll come to our last point. Kia ora, welcome back. Well, we're now at our last poem. What can we do over Matariki? Now, let's just put some practical actions into place. I'm going to take action, and so I'm now going to just give you some ideas or suggestions. These are not necessarily my own. Some of them are from the Matariki advisory group. Some are from other organisations that I've worked with, and I'll pose out some ideas that we do ourselves up here in Kaukui. If you look across the three columns that I have here, the first three statements that you'll see on acknowledging those who have passed away, coming together to eat, connect, and reconnect, strategic planning for the new year. Those are probably, if I was going to say any way of celebrating or giving recognition to Matariki, those would be the three big pillars that those who are promoting and advocating for Matariki would have. So firstly, it's the acknowledging of those who have passed away. And as I did when I opened up and we referenced the Mahutakawa star sign or the face around Matariki, it's an important time to give thanks for those of our loved ones who are no longer with us. And it can be a time for us, particularly when the stars set in the west in the beginning of May, and then Matariki rises up. There is a story that pertains to that in regards to a waka and a rangatira that captures all those who have passed on, and then when Matariki rises out, he's tossing them out into the stars. And that's where we get our saying, Ko rangitia, you have become the stars in the heavens. And that's just according to all that's out there that you may want to think about. But Matariki is an important time to acknowledge those who have passed away, is to give reference to them and to pay respects to them, and it can be a time to help our healing and restoration in regards to the mamae that's come with that. The next one across, to come together, to eat, connect and reconnect. I put the reconnecting in there because sometimes we live life and things happen and relationships get broken. And so Matariki is a time of getting together in the here and now. One of the funny things in contrast to the Gregorian or the lunar calendar is we do all our connecting in the summertime. Well, you know, have a summer break. We actually traditionally that happened for Māori at this time, because summertime was the working time. That was when you're working in the mara. That was when you're fishing. That was when you're doing all the stuff that you needed to survive the winter period. And so the winter period, or the Matariki season, is the hailing and of calling people back home and coming together and reconnecting and having fun and so forth. So that's another important part of this time. Strategically, the third part, we're taking this top bullet point there, over here is strategic planning for the new year. So Māori would get together and they would consider what's coming up in the new year. Some of that will be given by understanding what the stars and the signs of Matariki are telling us, whether it's fresh water or salt water or food from the sky in regards to birds or trees or from the whenua. These things would, depending on the brightness of it, would tell us which area is going to function well. And so they would plan accordingly. It's also a time where we can plan strategically within our organisations, within our clubs, our whānau, hapu iwi, within our church. So there's this process of considering things in the future. So those are the three big hangers that they would hang things on. If they were coat hooks, those would be the three. Acknowledging those have passed away, we're connecting with whānau now and planning for the future. And I've now just got some other ones that I want to throw in there. So time to give thanks for the harvest that we've had. So all kumara should be picked by now. And we've done that with our Matariki elements. I've now got our winter crop in. And so all our winter food is growing because everything shuts down and slows down. So while the soil was still warm, we planted all our winter vegetables. And now we're starting to see our broccoli, our cabbage, our silver beet, our spinach, all starting to grow quite nicely. Whereas all our summer summer vegetables have all died off, and we've harvested those. So we've got kumara in storage, we've got pumpkin in storage. I've frozen some tomatoes and we put those on storage. So it can be a time to give thanks for the harvest that has been. A relationship to come together, you're connecting with others in the community. It could be a time to connect with a whānau, not only your own family, but those around in your households and the street and the business areas that you might be environment in connected with. It could also be a time to connect to the environment. As I mentioned earlier, the lunar process of telling time, lunar, stellar and solar process, a Māori approach to it, it forces us to connect to our environment. It forces us to look at things and when is it time to plant, when is it time to harvest, when is it time to go fishing. So a lot of the birds that Māori would eat and harvest, they've all flown away. So everything is shutting down. So it can be a time for us just to reconnect not only with each other, but also the environment. Strategically, this could be a time where you plan the garden for the next season. So you could be thinking about, okay, crop rotation. Are you going to leave the soil fallow for one year? Are you going to rotate out? Are you going to put other vegetables in? And so you could start kind of planning that out and thinking about that. You might look at your fishing processes if you're out near the Kaimoana where we were, and you might think about different areas that you might fish so you're not overfishing particular areas. Preparing your tools, this is a great time now to start planning what resources you might need for those activities that you're doing. Regards to sharpening your tools, cleaning the boat, sorting out your garden beds. And for example, I've got chickens here, and so I've trained, or I've got a runner set up so that they're actually doing the soil. So when it comes to me ready to plant and put new things into the soil, it's already been tossed up and sheep poop, chicken poop is already in there fertilizing it. So it's all starting to happen. You could plan events for well-being and health, either in the home, your church, or in your workplace. You could think about how you'd plan those out in your calendar as a way of well-being and health, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. Again, from NZPMS. You can read this. I don't necessarily need to read it, but I will read the second paragraph. Matariki then is an opportunity for us to pause and reflect on the harvest and the providence of God over the year has been. It is also an opportunity for us to look at our storehouses and to look within our communities as to how we might share that prosperity. You know, Matariki is not just about ourselves. It's not about our own. It's just not just about our own things and what we do. It is about those that are around us. It is about whānau. It is about the community. It is about those that are less fortunate. And sharing our resources together out of the bounty that God gives us. So here are a couple of other options that we may consider, and then a set of, I've got a couple of questions there. We'll soon see. Do a working bee in your local community. Now, this is not my idea. It was just I saw this and I thought, that's a great idea. Yeah, get out there and help out, whether it's planting or bearing soil for community gardens. Get involved in harakeke or weaving as a group. Get to know each other and the chit chats that happen on the side. Engage in learning more about traditional Māori medicines or rongoa Māori, like kawa, manuka and harakeke and so forth. Take time to walk with friends. You know, get out in the spaces that we have here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We've got beautiful parks and tracks and places that we can go and just reconnect with our environment and creation. So that being said, here is the last set of questions for us to consider. What can we do as a community to connect to those around us? And how might we be called to meet the needs of others through the abundance that God has given us? So pause now, and then I'll come for my closing remarks. And if you have other questions in your local context that might be pertinent for you, then this could be a good time for you to chat too. Kia ora, welcome back. Well, here we go in our summary. Matariki is a time where we can get together to celebrate. We've now got another public holiday in the calendar, which for this year falls on the 24th of June 2022, and it's called Matariki. Matariki, ladies, is a star sign that marks the end of one year and the start of a new year to Māori. The government have set it up as a way to honour our treaty partnership, but also to give recognition to Māori kaupapa Māori things and te ao Māori, and an opportunity for all of us to share in this day or in this period of time and to celebrate it however we want to celebrate it. It's a time of year where we can come together to remember the past, give thanks for those that are around us, and plan for the new year. Mānawatia a Matariki. Celebrate Matariki. Ko reira whānau, tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I'd just like to say thank you all for this opportunity to share with you this little workshop on Matariki. Please do get in contact with local people because there are local stories. This is not an exhaustive presentation. It's just a snippet, and it's really just an introductory. And different tribal groups, different hapu will celebrate things in different ways. And part of the nuance of looking at Matariki is to get to know that. So you're not only connecting to your environment, but you're getting connected to local Māori and the whānau around us. So thank you, and I appreciate the time. Ko reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.